Chapter 26 of Streams to the River, River to the Sea, a novel of Sacagawea by Scott Odell. We came to the shining mountains. Behind us were the Columbia River and the sea. Ahead of us were the Yellowstone River and the Missouri. It was summer, yet snow lay deep on the trail. I rode a black horse that Captain Clark had bought for me from the Nez Perce. It was much easier riding in the snow than lower down where it had turned to slush. When we went over the mountains before, Miko had been too young to enjoy the snow. Now, when we camped, I let him loose to stumble around in the drifts with Scannon nosing around at his side. We had enough horses to carry our men, all their baggage, and all the things Captain Lewis had collected. But when we had gone through Lolo Pass, on our way to the sea, it was clear of snow. Now the snow lay heavy and had covered up all the landmarks. The pierced noses said that game would be scarce and the horses would be without grass for several days. Yet the captains decided to move. If we waited, there would be no chance to reach Fort Mandan that year. We would eat no more than one meal each day. The horses could go without grass, the captains thought. 2 of the Nez Perce promised to overtake us before we went far. We moved into Lolo Pass on snow twice the height of our horses. The guides did not come. We suffered from the cold. I wrapped Miko in 2 blankets. There was no game, not a bird bigger than a wren. The horses found no grass. Drewer, our only guide, wondered if we were on the right trail. The captain said we must be lost, so they gave orders to turn back. The men dug pits in the deep snow and buried what little food we had, all the baggage and all the papers the captains had kept. Drewer hurried ahead to see if he could find a guide in the Nez Perce village we had left only a few days before. He was told to offer a fine rifle to anyone who could lead us as far as Traveler's Rest. We pressed on behind Drewer, numb with cold. There were many frozen toes and fingers and faces. Trouble dodged us from the start. We lost a valuable mule and 4 horses. One of the men cut a vein in his leg. Captain Lewis could barely stop the bleeding. Another of the men tumbled with his horse while crossing Hungry Creek and lost his only blanket. After 3 days without grass, the horses began to starve. I cut long strips from the bark of an alder tree and fed them to my horse as we went along. The horses gnawed at each other's tails. By the time we came to the Nez Perce village, their tails were nothing but nubs. We found guides in the village. The brother of Chief Cutnose and 2 young warriors, for the gift of 2 rifles, agreed to show us the way over the pass. Captain Clark discovered some blue beads he had forgotten and bought salmon with them. We started back at once in the fierce cold. In 2 days, we reached the place where our goods were buried and dug them up. There was little to eat, nothing for the horses. The guides brought us to a lofty crag where the Nez Perce had built a stone mound and put up a pole. It was a sacred place for them. They said that that just beyond we would find food for our starving horses. They were right. The next day we came to vast fields of grass. The day after that, we were out of the heavy snow. Then came a blissful sight. Our hunters who had gone on ahead of us had killed a deer. The carcass lay beside the trail, ready to eat. That night, Captain Lewis spoke to us while we ate our first meal in days. We were camped near a village of flatheads. In the winter, Captain Clark and I decided to look for a shorter trail to the Great Falls, he said. We'll go back with 2 parties. I'll take a party up the Hellgate of Blackfoot to the falls. Then I'll explore the river that scolds at all the others and try to find out if there's a river that flows into it from the North Country. Captain Lewis was serious. He repeated his words again and named those men he would take. This is very important, he said. One of the reasons we made this journey was to find such a river. if it does exist, we will have a quick, sure way to carry Canadians' furs down to the Missouri and hence to market. He went on, speaking slowly. Captain Clark, he said, will take a party to the forks of the Beaver Head where our boats were left last fall. After the boats are put in condition, he will choose men to take them to the Great Falls. In the meantime, I will have left men there, and the two parties then will carry everything on a portage around the falls. The talk went on for a long time, but after I heard that I was to go with Captain Clark, I did not listen. I thought about Running Deer and my brother and all the Shoshone people. We were close to the place they always camped late in the summer, but now they would be down below hunting buffalo, too far away for us to see them again. I would never see them again. I also thought about Charbonneau's new wife, the girl he had chosen from the Flathead village. That night I said to him, "We are close to the place where you left your Flathead girl. Tomorrow we will go with Captain Clark in a different way. You do not wish to spend days riding back to find her." I hoped with all my heart that he would go and find the girl and somehow decide to stay with her and the Flatheads. Not a day had gone since we left Fort Clatsop that he had not complained about his health. The blisters on his hands from paddling, the saddle sores, his cough, or the long way he now had to travel to reach Fort Mandan, or how much he disliked Captain Clark. "You had best go now," I said. "Not someday." He grunted. "Oh, Charbonneau forgot. Bad husband, Charbonneau, huh?" "Just forgetful," I said. I did not wish to cause trouble. Maybe Charbonneau should go now. What you think, Shoshone? Go? "Go," I said. "Your wife may have a baby." "Sure, 2 babies, huh? Charbonneau, great man, huh?" But in the morning he had forgotten about his Flathead wife. We were on the trail 2 days before he spoke about her again. He got up from the breakfast fire and wiped the deer tallow from his beard. Everyone was asleep. He spoke quietly under his breath. "Charbonneau, go now. Shoshone, go too. Hurry. Keep little mouth closed. Shoshone, mouth also." "Go alone?" I said. "Go alone," I said. "It is a long way to the Flathead village, and a longer way back because by then Captain Clark will be 5 or 6 days ahead of us. We do not know the trail. We may never catch up with him. We may get lost." "Ki-yi, Captain Clark. Captain Clark, he is not your husband. Lost? Zut." I was kneeling by the fire, scooping dirt to put it out. I said nothing more and went on with the dirt. The horses were tied close to the tent, lest they be stolen in the night. He untied 2 horses. He picked up Miko, who was asleep beside me, and put him in the cradle board. I still knelt by the fire. When I did not move, he yanked me to my feet. "Hurry," he said. "Charbonneau not want nobody to see. Nobody's business, huh?" Miko began to cry. I did nothing to stop him. I put the cradle board on my back, taking my time, and did not get the horse. I walked slowly around the fire, away from Charbonneau, then ran toward our tent. He caught me before I had gone far, caught the cradle board and wrenched it from my back. He put a hand on my throat. "Quiet," he said, "or Charbonneau make you quiet. For a long time, quiet." I must nurse the baby, I said with all the breath I had. "He will die if he is not nursed. Charbonneau will find good food for Jean-Baptiste. Buffalo, deer, antelope, good thing all the time." He tightened the grip around my throat. "You come, Shoshone." "You come, Shoshone?" Our talk had awakened some birds. There was no sound from the camp, but the candle burned in Captain Clark's tent. "Now, Shoshone, you come?" "Yes," I said with the last of my breath. He helped me into the saddle and climbed into his. Quietly, we rode out of the camp toward the trail we had come along the day before. When we were out of hearing, Charbonneau gave me the cradle board and the baby. He kicked his horse into a quick trot and shouted for me to follow. I followed him for a way until we came to a stream. It ran deep with swift water from the melting snow. I knew it from my childhood. Farther down, it made a wide pool, and I had bathed there with my cousin running deer. The day before, when we crossed the stream, we had had a hard time. One of the men was thrown into the water and would have drowned if Ben York had not saved him. Now, as Charbonneau got to the deepest part of the stream, when his horse had to swim, I turned back. There was a shortcut to our camp which I knew about. I took it and rode fast. The camp was awake and fires were burning. I startled Captain Clark as I rode up. He was angry when I told him what had happened. He wanted to go after Charbonneau and bring him back. York wanted to go too. "We'll make him walk," York said. "He'd never get here," Captain Clark said. "Not walking on the feet he complains about all the time. He will find his wife and come back. He is very worried about her." I lied. Again, with all my heart, I hoped that he would stay with her and the Flatheads. 5 days later, he rode into camp. We were camped in a village on the Yellowstone. The people there were glad to see us. Even before Captain Clark gave them the last of our ribbons and some silver buttons from an old coat. At one side of the village was a grove of fir trees. Fir has many dry branches near the ground and throughout the whole tree. To welcome us and bring fair weather on our journey, the people had set them ablaze. Each tree was a sputtering spire that flared from top to bottom. On this night, Charbonneau and his flathead wife and her 2 slaves rode into the village. In the blazing light, she looked beautiful. In the morning, when I cooked breakfast for her, she looked even more beautiful. It was very cold. A wind blew down from the snowy peaks, and we were surrounded by heavy drifts of snow. She wore white moccasins that were sewn with blue beads and little bunches of porcupine quills. Her white ermine jacket had a circlet of black weasel tails around the collar. The breakfast fire shone on her face, which was shaped like a heart. She was the daughter of a chieftain. She looked like the chieftain's daughter. She acted like one, too. The camas root I baked for her she did not like. It had been dug long before it was ripe, she said. The elk was stringy. She had a pretty voice. It sounded like a rivulet running over a bed of ferns. Charbonneau could not keep his eyes off her. He sat and listened to her babbling, most about how powerful her father was. Charbonneau listened with his mouth open wide. She had the finest horse I had ever seen, yellow with orange spots. Her saddle was lined with brown beaver fur. That night, while we were sleeping, she got into her beaver-lined saddle and rode away on her fine horse with her 2 slaves. I urged Charbonneau to go and bring her back. "It is a law," I said. "The Minnetarees and the Blackfeet and the Shoshone say that you can make her come back. You can kill her if you wish." He expected me to be jealous. I was not. He muttered and tore at his beard, yet he was afraid to go. "I like the Shoshone better," he said, and threw his arms around me. But the next day, while we traveled through Big Hole Valley, where I knew the trails and streams and could be of help, he was angry. Whenever I told Captain Clark what trail to take, Charbonneau would wait until no one was watching, then give me a slap. Captain Clark was not sure of the country. It all looked alike to him, but not to me. I remember Shoshone Cove from the way the cottonwoods grew on a little island, and I told him that soon we would come to a gap in the mountain where we would find the canoes we had hidden the year before. By good fortune, I was right. We reached the gap and found the canoes in the river where we had sunk them. We also found the supplies we had left. The pounded meat and berries were still good. It was the chewing tobacco that the men were most glad to see. They had been chewing tree bark mixed with dry leaves, kinnikinnick, for weeks. They chewed and spat all day while they searched for a second lot hidden the year before. The chewers never found it. An awful loss, they said, the most awful yet. To travel downstream by boat was much different from going upstream. Before, the men had to toil against the current, pulling the boats along the ropes, pushing them with poles, their hands blistered and their feet full of thorns. In one day alone, the first day, We now made 97 miles. We reached Three Forks on the third day. We did lose some horses to the Crow, who are the best horse thieves anywhere. One misty night, they stole up and rode away with half our herd. They could not be followed because the ground was hard and gravelly and left no hoof prints. The next day, the stinging flies were so bad we had to build smoky fires and lather mud on the horses that were left. Our camp was surrounded by buffalo bushes, but the red berries were not much good to eat. The next day was better. We came to a field of prickly pears. The pears were deep purple and ripe, but they grew surrounded by thorns, the big ones that pierced thick leather. Also, they were covered with tufts of little thorns, sharp of needles. The men were hungry, but looked at the thorns and turned away. I had eaten many prickly pears. They are full of small, hard seeds, but the flesh is smooth. It tastes like warm milk when you drink it and dream all the time that you're in a meadow of sweet violets. There's only one way to fix a prickly pear. You knock it off with a stick, roll it quickly in a fire, and burn off the tufts. I showed the men how to do this, and they ate pears until they lay on the ground and groaned. At Three Forks, Captain Clark divided the party. He took 8 men, Charbonneau, me, and the baby, with a large herd of horses, and struck out to the east to meet Captain Lewis beyond the Rosebud River and the Powder, at the mouth of the Yellowstone. Before we got there, Captain Clark carved his name on a tall rock we came to beside the river. He held the baby up and pointed to it. "See, that's my name carved on the rock," he said to Miko. "And I have named the rock Pompey's Pillar. Do you like it?" The baby laughed and showed his teeth. Captain Clark had taught him to say American words long before he could speak Shoshone. He thought of Miko as his son. Tears came to my eyes. Captain Lewis was not at the mouth of Yellowstone, as he promised. We waited a day for him, but the mosquitoes and gnats were so bad that Captain Clark decided to move down the Missouri. He left a note on the tree for Captain Lewis to let him know where we were. We floated into nests of rattlesnakes. They swarmed everywhere. They even swam in the river, but no one was bitten. The mosquitoes came with us. They swarmed over our horses and stung them so hard the men had to build big fires and tether the horses in the smoke to keep them from bolting. Sergeant Ordway's eyes swelled shut, as did the baby's. Hunters killed a deer, but it was so thin we could not eat it. The men said that the animal was so poor because the mosquitoes had sucked away all of its blood. Our problem was now to find Captain Lewis. We floated down the river for half a day, traveling fast, 3 times as fast as when we pulled and pushed our way up against the current. At noon, we heard a shot. It was much louder than the shots of the Shoshone or the Nez Perce or the Flatheads, for these people used only a pinch of powder. Captain Lewis's men whooped and waved their shirts and fired their air guns, but the news they brought was bad. They had traveled far to the north and run into a band of Blackfeet, who stole some of their horses and nearly killed them in an ambush. Worse, Captain Lewis had learned that the Marias, the river that scolds at all the others, did not flow into the Saskatchewan, the river that flows down from the far north and the rich fur country. Worse yet, at least to us, Captain Lewis had been shot. As his canoe floated up and we waded out to see him, we found him lying under a blanket beside Scannon. He had been in an accident with Peter Crusette. The 2 men had gone out hunting for meat. Crusette, who had weak eyes, mistook Captain Lewis for a deer and had shot him in the back. Captain Lewis was always getting hurt in one way or another, but he was made of iron. By nightfall, he was on his feet again, and we all started down the river. We were near Fort Mandan now. The men cleaned their clothes as best they could, but the fringes on their jackets had all been cut off to make strings for their moccasins. They oiled their guns. Captain Lewis set up the cannon and the air gun ready to fire as soon as the fort came into view.